Now it's time for Buy, Rent, Burn. This is the continuing segment we're going to do on every podcast where we all pick a game and we discuss the picks that we've put forth, and we decide which of those three games that each of us would buy, if given the chance, rent, and then burn. So this episode, Andy has picked Growl for the Sega Genesis. This is a Taito game released in 1991. Justin has gone with Bionic Commando, the NES version. Capcom game, of course, released in 1988. And Ryan, myself, I have gone with Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. A Nintendo title, of course. And that was released in 1989. Andy, tell us about Growl.
Growl is something I just never played when I was younger. Never heard of it. It was on the shelf. I picked it up and decided to bring it to this week's podcast because it is something that is pretty unique. Growl is a beat 'em up in the vein of Double Dragon and Streets of Rage. It was originally for the arcade, but the thing that kind of sets us apart from them, it kind of has like an environmental theme focused on like animal preservation. You're going after poachers, so you're murdering just mobs of enemies with just the most overpowered like Rambo weapons you can find.
Yeah, I think that's like the most powerful lesson that the game teaches you, that fucking kill all the human beings you want, but don't you dare lay a hand on any animal that crosses your path.
Right,
like
exactly.
Most of the enemies were women, too.
I felt very uncomfortable with that. There's a lot of women I was killing.
Who knew the global poaching ring consisted of train yard workers, gypsies, and these like paralegal women, all in it for these animals, you know?
Yeah.
Carrying all different weapons, whips and swords and grenades.
I gotta say...
Yeah, where's she hiding that bazooka?
Well, that's true. Maybe that's their role in this whole like syndicate, is they like smuggle small animals through customs. That's their purpose.
How come when you throw a grenade, you lay on it?
No, you don't lay on it.
Because that's what feels best.
I loved that animation. I love the fact that every time you pick up a grenade, your guy tosses it and just lays on the ground with his arms over his head. Like, and you're just there until like the enemies in the screen explodes and there's body parts everywhere.
Right, and it's not just like your body's randomly on there. It's just directly right on your crotch every single time.
Did either of you have this happen where you threw one and then one of the women came out and threw theirs on top of you while you were laying prone?
Oh yeah, and then you get bombed.
Yeah, so like you kill everyone, but then you also almost kill yourself.
I didn't have that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the few beat 'em ups that I've played that actually has like guns in it too.
Mm-hmm.
There's not too many of them. It's usually like swords and like things you can throw the guns.
That was another thing where I was like it was kind of cringy. Like thinking back of the era that came out, like you're picking up a gun and I'm shooting like screenfuls of women in miniskirts. I'm just like, how did this pass? Like, well, I guess there wasn't like ESRB back then, but man, that was apparent. Whew.
You're saving the animals, so it's fine.
Yes. Human genocide is permissible as long as the animals are safe.
I don't know if everyone's got to the point where you save the elephant. I think that's the point in the game where I kind of like dropped the controller and like, okay, this is a next level game.
That definitely sold me. Like, even leading up to the point before you'd rescue the elephant where the end boss pleads for you not to kill him and then he throws a knife at your feet. Like, I was just in tears. You, of course, murder him and then free the elephants. And then when that elephant... So I got to the next screen and, like, the screen fills with enemies and this elephant comes charging in. So my natural instinct, I think a lot of gamers, you jump out of the way of this elephant. No, but the elephant goes on, like, a freaking homicidal rampage to destroy every enemy for you. Like, you have an elephant working on your side, just obliterating people into, like, flesh chunks all over the screen. It might be one of the best things in gaming I've ever seen. Absolutely phenomenal.
At the same time, it doesn't look like he's on a rampage either. It looks like somebody took an elephant out of clip art and just moved him across the screen. The animation on it is so slow, it looks like he's hardly even walking, if he's moving at all.
That's right. Did you guys all take the main character too? Like the first one who looks just like Indiana Jones?
Yep.
And you get a whip like 5 seconds into the game, so you're literally playing as Indiana Jones.
Yep. Yeah, it's something. And then the elephant takes down a tank, which is pretty crazy in itself, and there's about 200 people in that tank. I don't know how they fit in there.
Yeah. Or, well, the same thing like in that opening sequence where you bust open that train car and like 500 eagles fly out. I'm like, how did they get them all in there? This is amazing.
Yeah, it seems like more effort than what it's worth, probably.
This is like an absolute experience. Like, to me, there's life before you've played Growl, and there's life after. Like, it's that, like, pivotal to me. I just can't believe I didn't know anything about this game all these years. It's just, I mean, it's a beat 'em up, right? So it's not in depth. It's finding the exploits with the weapons, like the whip, which attacks both directions. So you just stand in the middle of the screen and spam it. But I don't know, just the absurdity of the whole thing, the premise. It doesn't do anything exceptional, but it's just strange enough and bonkers enough that it becomes exceptional with those like other things thrown in. It was an amazing game. Like, I just could not stop enjoying it. It was just
right. It's good for like a playthrough. I think it's not like Streets of Rage where you're like, I want to play this because the music's great, the action's great, it feels good. Like, a Growl is not quite up to that level. I don't think. Yeah,
there's no depth in the mechanics to really add an extra layer. It's just kind of the experience it sets forth for you. But fantastic. I cannot believe I've never heard of this.
Yeah, I was blown away too. Like, at first the poacher, going after poachers, like, right away, it's like the thinnest veil of any type of story too. It's just like 2 lines. It's just like, go murder those poachers now, you know?
Well, you know what's also kind of impressive that you don't really think about as you're playing it is the number of on-screen enemies and sprites for a Genesis game is kind of staggering. I mean, you'd have, I don't know, what would you say, 10 to 15 characters coming at you with relatively no slowdown.
Right, but they only have to load one model in because they're all the same woman.
No, some of them have blue dresses, some of them have red dresses. Totally different. Yeah, fantastic game. I wish it was 2 players. My only gripe, but enjoy the laughs with a friend. But man, this is a great game.
Well, the arcade is 2-player, isn't it?
I would assume so.
You would think it would be, because I watched a video on it too, and there was 4 characters moving on the screen.
Really?
So I don't know.
Might be worth trying to get running in MAME then.
Yeah.
Just check it out that way.
Look more into it, because if it's possible for 4 players, that
would be quite an experience.
Yeah. You would think there'd be so much going on the screen though, but I don't know. I think that was the arcade version though that I watched, because it had credits, so it must have been arcade. So maybe they had 4-player arcade? I don't know.
I can see that. That was kind of like, that'd almost be what you'd have to do at that point in the beat 'em up, you know, because that was when beat 'em ups were at their peak in the arcade.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to compete with like a Double Dragon, what's better than 2 more players, you know?
Yeah, 2 more quarters.
Exactly.
I think the credits only went up to 9, because it was, must have been, I suppose, emulated as well, but...
Yeah. Interesting. How about your pick, Justin? Bionic Commando.
Yeah, Bionic Commando. I suppose it's a action platformer type game. I picked it. It's one of the games that I had when I was growing up, and I remember playing it numerous times and struggling really bad at it. And then it's one of those games that we just kept putting in, me and my little brother. And finally, we did actually get through and beat the entire game. And I probably promised myself I would never play it again after beating it, but I decided to pick it for this so I could play it again. You know, it's entertaining. I honestly can't stand the sound effects now. Like, it was pretty rough playing it, having to listen to the terrible sound effects. Maybe it was distorted too because I emulated it instead of hooked up my Nintendo, but it was way worse than what I remember as far as that. But the gameplay was what I remember. I didn't get very far because it's a tough game.
Right. So is that good or bad from what you remember? Like,
it's probably worse than what I remember, but you know, you look back and think of all the times that you play it and how frustrating you were, but how satisfied you were when you finally beat it. So I guess overall it's probably a good memory. But
yeah, that's I feel like Bionic Commando. It's one of those games that people really love or they just despise, and I fall in the despise camp. I struggle with that game. I find the grappling hook mechanic frustrating. Just kind of wears on my patience. Never really gotten far in the game at all, which is probably too bad. Maybe if I forced myself, I could get to the point where I understood it and it started clicking. But in playing it again in preparation for the podcast, I just instantly got frustrated with it. I mean, I gave it maybe half an hour or so. I just can't get into it. I don't know. Maybe, like, you know, in your case, Justin, like you said, if I'd played it as a kid and I had those memories. Because you're right, there is something about persevering with, like, a difficult game, especially when we were kids and we had amazing patience. I'd feel, you know, a little bit of nostalgia towards it, but I never got around to it as a kid. And by the time I got around to it, as in my collecting days, I don't connect with it. It's just too frustrating for me, mechanic-wise, to really enjoy.
It's kind of frustrating with the grappling hook, but once you kind of get that and know each certain levels, you have to bring certain things with you, otherwise you won't ever get past it. So you have to try it and realize that you brought the wrong equipment.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same camp as Ryan, where I've just never been able to grapple the controls. I think, like you said, there's a lot more depth to it if you can actually get to a lot of the other levels and have the patience to get there and learn the controls. Because, yeah, there's a lot to it with items and stuff like that. But I had the same problem, like the grappling hook. There was one level I just could not get over some spikes just because there's like, once you grapple, you start getting to the top and you can't go down. Like it pulls himself in, you know? And there's no way to like lower yourself and swing some more. So you just instantly, the only thing you could do is just drop down and die. And I just could not get past that part. I think Bionic Commando is a really good 16-bit game that was stuck on a 2-button 8-bit system.
Well, and it suffers because it was one of the earliest Capcom ports to the NES, so they arguably weren't the most skilled in developing for that platform or porting to that platform yet.
Yeah. Yeah, just having a couple extra buttons, I think, just to help out with the controls, I think would have made that game incredible, I think.
Yeah. Had a jump. Or
yeah, a jump. Even. I'm sure that would have broken some of the design, probably.
And explain this to me, is like, what determines, because sometimes when you get to the end of your grapple, you're allowed to jump up. I mean, is it material based? Like sometimes you can't jump through certain things? I
think it's if there's like multiple things. Like sometimes you get the platform and then like barrels above the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't jump through the barrels because you can only jump through the one platform. And then like one thing that really bugs me is that you can't, like, you know, like you were saying, you can't rappel back down once it's gone up. So like if you're on the top floor, you have to just fall down to the next. Like, why can't I just drop down right where I'm at? But that's part of the game. But at least that's what bugs me now, because I suppose other games that I've played now allow you to do that.
Yep.
How about you, Ryan? What did you bring?
Well, I went with Super Mario Land for the Game Boy, because that's a game that I had early on in my days of owning the Game Boy, and it's a game I loved and thought was fantastic, and it wasn't until years later when the internet decided that supposedly this is a terrible game that everyone hates. I didn't get that from playing the game as a kid. It's most closely akin to the original Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers for the NES, and that, you know, that early game feel. But it does some interesting things in that it turns some of the principles on their head. If you jump on a turtle, for instance, instead of it being a shell, it's just a bomb that will explode if you stand next to it. So that's kind of a shocker. And it also brings in some interesting mechanics like side-scrolling shooting levels that you just don't see in any other Mario game. End game goals, you can go for a higher or a lower exit on each stage to get to do a bonus game. And then it's just got some strange enemies and locations in there, right? There's like a Chinese theme level, there's an Egyptian level. The end bosses all vary. I mean, it's a seahorse, it's a tiger. But to me, the game still feels very tight, very playable. It's got certain things like the fire flower that make it over, and the star from the original mushroom, or from the original Mario Brothers, that they're the original power-ups. One thing that I, again, feels off is that the fire flower gives you a ricocheting bullet, which is different than any other game, but they also use it in some really smart ways in level design as far as getting into warp pipes and picking up all the coins, because the projectile now will pick up coins for you. So you can shoot it into interesting places to get extra coins. And it also has some of the most, I guess, iconic music for me. I don't know that a lot of people talk about it, but I love the music in that game. In fact, like, I'll play one of the tracks here. I don't know if you guys are hearing that, but like, this song feels like something out like a sick, like I could be strutting down the street, like all, you know, like, dancing around, snap my thing, like, I don't know, there's just something that's making me super happy to hear this. Like, and then my favorite part though is like, there's that, like I mentioned, I guess Chinese-ish theme level, which has got like the most slightly racist music. I mean, I don't know. So, as much as I love some of the soundtrack, I would say, like, it's hit or miss. I think the game is kind of hit or miss. It's an oddity. It isn't really in the vein of what the spirit of like a typical Mario game. But honestly, I've always kind of felt that was the best of the three Mario games. Because you've got this one, you've got Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins, which everyone loves. And they think that Super Mario Land, the first one, is the weird one. But if you look at really what's in Super Mario Land, that game is bonkers. Like, so much more bonkers and off base of what a Mario game is than this one. And then the third one, Super Mario Land 3, was the first Wario game. So I guess to me, if I'm looking back, I think Super Mario Land is probably the most traditional games on the original Game Boy in the Mario series. So yeah, and I played through it again. I beat it. It's a 20-minute game, maybe 30 minutes. And I loved it, and I still thought it was great. But curious to see what you guys thought.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. There's definitely some limitations to the Game Boy that can't give you the full Mario experience, I don't think. Like the fire flower, I don't know if you noticed, like when you shoot it, it's like it goes out like 3 pixels in front of you. So if you're going to shoot a guy like right next to you without, the ricochet, he's got to be right on you, which seems like it's a lot tighter window for that. The side-scrolling levels I thought were pretty cool. Just kind of like shooting blocks to get through things. That's interesting in a Mario thing because there's not a lot of block breaking on a, horizontal plane. But the thing with that, like it seemed like you could only have like 2 or 3 bullets out at a time, so you couldn't really spam.
Right.
Not like you needed to either. Those levels are pretty easy. Overall, this game is pretty easy, I would say.
I'd agree.
But probably maybe the first glimpse of like what modern Mario games do now, where it's like, oh, you can beat the level easily, but if you really want to challenge, you have to get the coins and stuff like that. Kind of the goals of every level, where you have to make a couple more challenging jumps just to get up to the top goal. I think that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I enjoyed it quite a bit for kind of being a somewhat off-brand Mario. But like you said, I think it is the closest to Mario out of Mario Land. I wish kind of that they kept Mario Land weird. Like the 3DS one and the Wii U one aren't that weird.
Right. Well, and one thing that I guess, I don't know how you guys played it. I played it on the Game Boy player for the GameCube. One thing I should mention is that this game has like some fierce blurring on the original Game Boy, screen blur, that makes it quite a bit more difficult to like play that already like dim and greenish screen. But I mean, like you said, limitations of the system at the time.
Yeah. Plus it was like, this had to have been the first one that Miyamoto wasn't a part of.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. And I think that's why people think it's weird because of it,
Yeah.
Yes, I guess I enjoyed it. It felt, kind of like traditional Mario. The biggest thing that bothered me was, like, I emulated it on my Raspberry Pi, and I don't know if it was the ROM or what that I got, but it was the coloring. It was like an orangish yellow. I'm pretty sure that the Game Boy, like I never had a Game Boy actually, but that wasn't orangish yellow color on that, was it?
No, it was like 4 shades of green.
Yeah.
But I wonder if if they guess that kind of like guessing the palette was that for those first ones, because those were like pyramids and sand,
Right. I could see that.
But it was like everything, like even the plants that were coming up were, for me, I don't know. Could have just been the ROM I got too, I suppose. But and then also the music. The only music I heard was the first one, and that played on every track. So when I got to the map that had the different Chinese stuff on it, I thought the game was just blurring because it had the same music as the prior one. So I didn't really know what was happening there, but now that you explain that, it makes more sense because it was symbols and stuff, so, or their letters or whatever. I don't know. But overall, I actually really enjoyed the game. I was really confused at first when I shot the fireball because it didn't fly the pattern that I thought it should.
Yeah, and it just bounces off into nowhere, right?
Yeah, so like I missed a bunch right away until I realized the pattern, and then I was following one, and it bounced up and started hitting coins, so I thought I was losing coins because it was destroying them or something, realizing that now it actually grabbed them for me. But overall, I actually really enjoyed the game.
Good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought it was good. My sister lost my childhood copy, like somewhere in my youth, so I ended up rebuying a loose card version of that from Software Etc. before they were rebranded for like $20 at like my sophomore year of college. So I definitely am a fan of that game. I paid way too much for it a second time. But now, so we've gone through the games. We've all kind of discussed them. Now is the time when we get down to the hard facts of if you would buy, rent, or burn each of these, how do you rate them? Andy, we started with Growl first, so it's only fair that you give us your verdict to kick this off.
Sure. I just want to say how lame it is that you bring a Mario game compared to everybody else.
But to be fair, it's the one that everybody hates. I thought I was... Okay, I'll be more original next time. You have a point.
No, I think it was a good pick because it, like you said, it is kind of like the redhead Mario, right?
Hopefully my wife's not listening to this. Kidding.
So yeah, my buy is probably going to be Growl. I was expecting that to not be. When I looked at this list, I'm like, that's going to be either rent or burn. But when I started playing it and got all the way through the ridiculousness of that game, just for that experience, I'm going to have to say that was a buy. If I played it like four more times, probably burn it. But second, my rent is probably going to be Super Mario Land. I think it actually fits the word rent pretty well too, because it is such a short game. I do enjoy Super Mario Land 2 just because of that reason alone. It's more of a complete game, I think. A lot more going on to it, in that regard. But yeah, still a very solid game. Out of all of these, I would probably play that more. And then my burn is going to be Bionic Commando. And not because I think they're ambitious in what they were trying to do with that game. It was just the wrong place at the wrong time with that game. For me, I think it worked for a lot of other people, and a lot of other people got through the shortcomings of the system and found out, what kind of game was behind it. But for me, even after all these years, it's just not happening.
Yep.
How about you, Justin?
All right. Kind of stuck on this. I want to go Grow, but only if you can have two players. Just because it's not a game that I would want to sit and play by myself, I guess, a bunch. But if you could have two players, which I don't know if you can on the console version or whatever, then I would do that as my buy. But just because I'm not sure, I'm going to go with Super Mario Land as my buy. And I'm going to do Grow as my rent. Sadly, I'm going to burn the game I brought. Not because I don't like it, because these other two beat it.
Makes sense.
It's really sad that, Bionic Commando has to sit next to Shadow Blasters.
How dare you? Don't you ever draw that comparison. The same people who made Pepsi Man. They shouldn't have even mentioned in the same sentence as Bionic Commando.
It hurts.
Nice. Okay. Well, I kind of thought coming into this week, after playing these games, surface level, I was going to selfishly stick with mine, Super Mario Land, but Growl. Growl is my buy. That is such a bonkers game, and it's just, I could totally see that being something that you'd want to own just to pop in and show somebody, just to watch the reaction to the absurdity that is Growl. And the underlying gameplay is solid enough that I could see picking it up and playing every once in a while. Outside of that, is it the greatest game ever? No. But there's also never been a game that I've played that is more ridiculous and just enjoyable for the short time you can pick it up and play it. So Growl wins for me on the buy. I would rent Super Mario Land as much as I love it. One of my favorite games of all time. I'd kind of agree that the length keeps it well suited for the rent category. It'd be easy to pick that up, play through it, send it back and then pick it up in a year again if you wanted to re-rent it in that situation. And then, of course, my burn, it's unanimous on this one. Again, Bionic Commando. It's a Capcom game. I hate doing that to a Capcom game, but it's one that I just can't get behind. I know there's a lot big fan base for it, but mechanics-wise, it's too clunky and it's not for me. So, buy, rent, burn, we all torched Bionic Commando.
I didn't want to.
Well, honestly, I don't think any of these are what you would say, quote-unquote, bad games. I think they're all...
Right.
So it's kind of a tough call, There's an argument to make for even Bionic Commando.
So with that, we'd like to hear what you would think you would take in this category of buy, rent, burn. Is it Growl, Super Mario Land? And, of course, you're going to burn Bionic Commando. But we'd like to hear that opinion and the votes at weekendpodcast.com. There's a section there for buy, rent, burn. got all 3 games lined up. You can pick your category and submit it, and your vote will be counted, and that will be up until July 21st. So get those votes in. We'd like to hear what you say, and then our next podcast, we're going to go over them, I think.
Nice.
Snarf, snarf.